There's 60 ethanol plants that have signed up.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on the Comstock Channel. I'm Marlin Bohling with you. Always a pleasure to visit with you about ag-related issues. Well, today, my very special guest happens to be Tom Buis. He is the CEO of the American Carbon Alliance. He joins us today to talk about some new developments, namely in North Dakota and in Minnesota. So, Tom, if you would, share with our audience what some of these latest developments are there.
Well, recently, last week, North Dakota gave the approval for the site where the carbon will be stored, the sequestration site. It will be pumped into the ground about a mile deep in South or North Dakota. And North Dakota, the reason is North Dakota has the geological formations that you can store this without it leaking forever, and that's the requirement for the ethanol industry to be able to capture the carbon and get credit for being a low carbon fuel. The second announcement last week, actually they were both on the same day, was in Minnesota. Minnesota granted the permit for a pipeline that's to be built from western Minnesota and goes over into North Dakota and hooks up with the pipeline there. Both of these announcements are in addition to announcements earlier this year where Iowa approved the pipeline, the main route, and North Dakota approved the pipeline component of the approval process for the pipeline in North Dakota. They have a two-step process up there, Marlin. One is the Public Utilities Commission has authority over the pipeline, and then the state's Industrial Commission has the authority over the sequestration site. That's why it's two different processes.
This has been a long uphill battle, hasn't it? Now, in this particular case, we're talking about the Summit pipeline that got approval.
We are talking about the Summit pipeline, which is the biggest proposed pipeline out there. There are others that are smaller, and they're in various stages of approval as well. But this one's probably been the most controversial because there's a lot of people that, number one, they don't want to see fossil fuels or current fuel be improved where it can qualify as environmentally friendly. A lot of these entities just want to see electric vehicles kind of come hell or high water. That's the only alternative they want. And, when you're talking public policy and the good for the country and everyone, even the environment, it ought to go to those, whatever type of product. It ought to be product neutral. Whoever can accomplish the goals, which is in this case reduction of carbon, and we know that the ethanol industry can do it. We're clean, we're renewable, and it's just a matter of qualifying for those next step, which is huge for the farm economy. Marlon, I haven't seen any new demand potential like this. Basically since the ethanol industry came along 20 years ago.
Tom, I think it's important to note that, a lot of people think this would be the first of its kind, but there have been carbon pipelines around for years, right?
Correct. In fact, there's a carbon pipeline that's been around for 15, maybe going on 20 years in North Dakota that goes up into Canada. There are carbon pipelines in the western part of the Corn Belt that go in for ethanol or for oil recovery. Gets pumped in the ground. It helps bring out more oil from spent wells. They've been doing that. A lot of people have been doing that for a long time. It's not new. It's just a new program that connects with agriculture and the ethanol industry. And, my feeling on all this is there's a market out there. We're not trying to do something that there's not an existing market for and a potential. We're trying to capture that market. And the more we can do for that means farmers will be able to get the price a fair, profitable price from the marketplace and won't have to count on government assistance, which, as you know, Congress is currently debating whether or not to spend tens of billions of dollars for economic assistance for farmers because of low prices. And that may be necessary in the short term, but I think a much better way, and I've never met a farmer in my life that wouldn't prefer to get that price from the marketplace. And that's what we're trying to do, is create new demand that allow them to benefit.
Well, I know there's a lot of confusion over this entire project, how it works. For someone that maybe just is getting exposed to this for the first time, how does it work? How do you get the carbon from point A, where it originates, to point B or C or D, where it ends up being stored in the ground? And why is it necessary to do that?
The ethanol industry actually is very fortunate in this debate, because the only thing that goes up the smokestack of an ethanol plant is steam and carbon. And that carbon is roughly a third of a kernel of corn. Another 1/3 is starch, which is what ethanol is made from. And the final third is all the good nutrients for animals, the fibers, the oils, the proteins, which get returned in the ethanol process into a product called distiller's grains. So that 1/3 of that kernel of corn actually is the carbon. You can capture that carbon very easily because in an ethanol plant, because it doesn't need to be separated. It's not expensive. It doesn't have other pollutants, like if you were trying to capture carbon like at a coal plant or somewhere. They've got other pollutants that going up there with it. Gets expensive. So you can capture it easily, efficiently, but then you have to ship it to somewhere in the country where you can store it, because the requirements to qualify for sustainable aviation fuel or as a low carbon fuel, you have to reduce your carbon footprint by about 50%. Now, to do that, it requires us to transport it somewhere. North Dakota is a prime example of where you can store it. They have the rock formations and the topography that allows it there. On the other spectrum, east of there, you'd have to go to Illinois or Indiana or Ohio. But you got to go somewhere from all the ethanol plants in the middle of the country. And a pipeline is by far the most efficient, the safest, and the most technologically advanced. You can't truck it. There would be not enough trucks to pump this stuff or transport this stuff in this quantity. Rails offer another challenge, and we've seen what happens on rail safety, right? Pipelines are safe. They're not obtrusive. You don't have to sit there and stick them. The pipeline companies have proposed to put them below the tile level, so it doesn't interfere with the tile. Basically guarantees that they will fix any tile issues that occur in the process. If they occur, guarantee the yield to the farmer, and then they get a check. They get a check for a lease payment. They don't sign over title to the land, but you got to get it somewhere. And these pipeline proposals today are, again, the safest pipelines and most advanced technologically of any that ever been in the ground. And you may not know it. You probably got some under your house or near your house. There's about 3 million miles of pipelines already in the ground in this country, and they transport a lot more dangerous products than CO2.
Now, would you logistically have to run a pipe to every ethanol plant in the country? I mean, would they all have to be connected by pipeline, or how would that work?
There's 60 ethanol plants that have signed up in that 5-state area that want to be connected. And you have to run you got a main route of the pipeline, but then you got these feeder lines that go out to the ethanol plant. So yeah, you connect them up. No different than what you do with pipelines for other products, like natural gas or propane.
Now, you and I were talking before we started this recording here, and a lot of people are wondering what kind of form does this carbon take when you put it in the ground? Is it a gas? Is it a solid like coal or charcoal, or is it a liquid, or what is it?
We haven't been able to make it like charcoal yet, but it's liquefied and compressed. And it would be high compression um, pipeline. And those pipelines, the requirements to build them are very strict. The safety standards are second to none. And, the process works basically like any other pipeline, except that these are a lot smaller than a water pipeline or a big oil pipeline or these. I think the biggest sections, and some of it are risers and stuff, at the tall end of it is 24 inches, but most of it's 6 to 8 inch pipe. It's not big.
So, what kind of capacity are we talking about here, Tom? I would assume you measure it in gallons or tons, or how do you do that?
Yeah, they measure it in tons, and every ethanol plant is different depending upon the size in their process. But it's doable. There are plants that are doing it right now. In North Dakota, there are 2 ethanol plants that just pump it straight into the ground, a mile deep. Um, and there are a lot of proposals on the table from ethanol plants all over the country to do that. There's non-ethanol pipes or facilities that capture carbon as well. And the reason it's so important for us in rural America is we talked about the demand, but also it's about making America energy, us owning American energy sources and stuff, because we know other countries are looking at doing this. Brazil, for example, and they've already announced plans to do it. The United States can be the biggest player and certainly should be the biggest player. And allows rural America to be a part of it. Oftentimes people love to fly over rural America. They call it flyover states, but we are so important to our nation's food source and more so our nation's energy source.
Well, if they would approve sustainable aviation fuel in a big way, and we're kind of waiting on some regulations in that regard, and who knows how that's going to turn out, but that could actually totally turn the corn market around, couldn't it? I mean, that could lead to just insane demand for the corn product because of aviation fuel is a high demand product, way more than the automobile industry, right?
Yeah, it's 50 billion gallons a year of worldwide, and it wouldn't just turn corn industry around. I always use the analogy that corn's the biggest crop, and its impact on all the other commodities is really big. A rising tide lifts all boats, and a sinking ship brings them all down, right? Corn is such a dominant player in the market. And we saw it with the ethanol industry 20 years ago. We were in tough times in rural America on commodity prices. Farming wasn't profitable. We were had to count on the federal government, to basically keep going year after year. And the ethanol industry came along, and it didn't just lift corn prices; it lifted commodity prices all over, because they're all linked at the end of the day in what people are going to produce. And so the more people produce for corn, which I don't know if you remember, we used to think, oh my gosh, an 8 billion bushel corn crop. Well, now it's 15 billion bushels every time. Farmers responded, the ethanol industry responded, and they will continue to do that. And in fact, farmers are so good at what they do, so efficient at producing. They're I don't know if you could design any industry that's as ever would be as productive of producers as you do the American farmer. And they're overproducing right now. Every year the yields go up, and in the ethanol industry, likewise, they're getting more efficient. And so, what's the next step? And the next step is we have to have new demand, and not just for sustainable aviation fuel. That's not the only new demand market out there, but certain states have low carbon fuel standards. They require low carbon fuel, and so for ethanol to rise higher blends in the marketplace, you need to be low carbon. Canada, for example, Canada wants low carbon ethanol. Well, for us to be low carbon ethanol, we got to have that designation, and reducing the carbon by 50% under these programs does that.
Now, how do the farmers benefit from this?
Farmers benefit in demand, and the demand raises the price of corn. Anytime supply exceeds demand, I guarantee you're going to have a low price. And in commodity markets, the way Econ 101 works for them is if you have excess supply, you're going to have a low price on the whole crop. And it's kind of how it works. I used to tell people if there's no demand out there, if you don't have bidders for that product, you're not going to get a good price. If I were selling to my brother alone, I guarantee you he wouldn't pay me a fair price. But if I got competition out there and trying to sell it, he's got a bid for it. And that's what happened when the ethanol industry came along. I mean, we have history to that effect. Now, the other thing is exports internationally. They all want low carbon fuel. When you go meet with any international buyer, they say, well, we'd like your more ethanol from the United States if it were classified as low carbon. So it's a detriment to us that we're not low carbon.
Well, Tom, you got the news and the new developments out of North Dakota and Minnesota. What's next? Because I assume you have to kind of take things in order here.
Yeah. Well, we've got the approval in the South Dakota to go through. Ultimately, Nebraska, which will be county by county in that state. Every state's different in the requirements and their approval process. And then also about a year from now, Iowa will be making it, or a year or less, making a determination on the second route in that state because of the expansion into new plants. And then on the federal level, they have this program called 45Z, and 45Z is the Treasury designation for the new rules that are coming out on how you qualify for low carbon status, not just for ethanol plants, but also for farmers. Like on your farm, if you want to do X, Y, and Z that improved your carbon footprint, and how that translates into a lower carbon score for the production of ethanol. That's huge. And it's also an advantage for the farmer because, again, he'll have a demand for a product that there's no one else out there competing for. So all that's going to lead to a higher price. But, we're pretty confident that that's going to go forward. We're also confident that Congress will probably extend that tax credit program. When they originally designed it, it was only 3 years, which probably wasn't enough to spur the type of investments that you're going to need. Investors generally want a little longer. So there's plans underway in Congress to extend it to up to a total of 10 years.
Tom, great information. Thank you again for sharing this with our audience and keeping us updated on what's going on. Still have a few hurdles to clear the way it sounds, but anyway, you're knocking a few down as we go. And now we'll see what this continuing resolution amounts to, if anything. And then, of course, we have to wait for the 45Z. I don't know what the timeline is on that, but that'll be coming. That is not part of the CR from what I
No,
understand.
it is not.
That'll be a whole separate deal. But I look forward to talking with you again here before too long, and maybe we'll have more updated information. But great to talk with you. Thanks for all the help, and I appreciate that. And I hope you have a Merry Christmas, and let's have a terrific, successful New Year in 2025 too, okay?
Well, thanks, Marlin, and thanks for what you do. And thanks for spreading the information out there that is so vital to anybody, whether they're making the decisions or whether they're living under the decisions. Information is power, and what you do in your job is just as important as all the other players in the process. Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you very much, and to all of our viewers and listeners out there. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Thank you to Tom Buis, the CEO of American Carbon Alliance, with us. And that'll do it. For producer Brianne Jenkins, I'm Marlin Bohling, and we will catch you next time right here on the Comstock Channel. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and/or options is substantial, and each investor and/or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.